Hello and welcome to the Women at the Top podcast interview series. My name is Regina Barr and I'm the founder of Women at the Top Network, and I will be your host today. For those of you who are just joining us, Women at the Top is a community of like-minded women who share the Watt vision and mission. And our goal, simply put, is to empower aspiring women to lead. And we do this in a couple of ways: by providing information, by providing training, and by helping women to connect with one another. Joining me today is Laura Berger, author of Radical Sabbatical, a hilarious journey from a stifling rut to a life without boundaries. But before we get started talking about her book, I want to tell you a little bit about Laura. Laura is the founder and CEO of Berger Group, a global leadership development consultancy, a pioneer in evidence-based methodology that measures the before and after leadership competencies of her clients. Laura has spent 20 plus years coaching exceptional leaders into the C-suite and the boardroom. In October 2020, Laura became a trustee at the Committee for Economic Development and the Conference Board. This membership puts Laura on the front lines of cutting-edge public policy decisions, bringing a corporate perspective to policy recommendations delivered to Washington. What's more, she has access to a unique and rare understanding of economic policy that enables her to impact or impart to her clients more solid thinking that gives them a more secure footing on the global stage. On that note, welcome to our program today, Laura.
Thank you, Regina. It's really wonderful to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this topic, and I don't know if it just has to do with where I'm at in my own life, or just because, we're on the verge or the beginning of summer or what. So let's go ahead and get started. And I always like to start with the backstory of our authors to find out, what was it that inspired you to write this particular book?
Sure. So many of you probably had this initial inspiration yourselves throughout your life, where you have gone on vacation and thought, oh, this is so amazing. This is so magical. I could live here. I could just escape and live here. And wouldn't that be wonderful? Well, that is exactly what occurred for my husband and I when we went on vacation to Costa Rica. And we call it the Pura Vida Costa Rica gotcha type of story. And Pura Vida means pure life. So when we decided to do this, of course, we came back from vacation, as so many of us do, and life took over. And then it was like, oh, we can't move there. But ultimately, we ended up taking that plunge and picking up and moving to a remote village of Costa Rica.
Wow. And that's what led you to write this amazing book.
Correct? Yes.
Okay.
Having said that, though, it was not our intention to write a book. And while we were living there, we didn't have access to internet. We call it in the book, we call it the intermittent net cafe. So this was before internet was really, widely distributed. And so we would blog. This was before blogging was very popular, to keep in contact with our family, but it was on an open line. It wasn't a private chat. And that went viral. Just all of our shenanigans and experiences that we were having went global. And so people, next blog, when's your next blog? And it wasn't until we came back and we repatriated back into the United States that we thought, wow, maybe we have a book here. And so then that was really the inspiration, was others being inspired by it, quite frankly.
That's fabulous. And I have been to Costa Rica, and it's been a while. And I'll tell you, I'm very familiar with having to find the hot spot. So I can appreciate what you're talking about there. So in your book, you describe how you and your spouse left your corporate jobs, packed your bags, moved to Costa Rica. Tell us what that was like, and how did you prepare for this life-changing move?
Sure. So when I was a kid, I may be dating myself, we had a globe, and my brother and I would spin the globe, and then we would put our finger on it and be like, oh, this is where we want to go. And so that in essence is at the core of both my husband and I, because my husband, when we got married, we put together a spreadsheet and then we randomized it. And it was like, where are we going to go on vacation next? And so that was a randomization tool that we used to help, cultivate this love of travel. So with Costa Rica, as I mentioned, going on vacation, coming back, we had to, because we're consultants at heart, we both come from that background, we started doing a pros and cons list, which is really great. I mean, it definitely helps you, try to narrow down, the benefits and the drawbacks. And then also we started journaling with one another around our hopes and fears. And the hopes and fears component of it was very impactful just in moving us outside of that task, of like drilling down more into the innovation aspect of it. And just to like throw a little bit of neuroscience into it is, so in the brain, we have two different circuits. We have an innovative circuit and we have an attention or focus circuit. And what's interesting about that is they cannot really operate at the same time. So when one is dialed up, the other is dialed down. And so for us to tap into both of those was very beneficial in us making this decision, because we were able to dive into the focus and task master it, and then step back and say, okay, now what are our hopes and fears, and what does that look like, and can we imagine ourselves there? And that fueled us taking this leap together.
So I have to ask, what was one of your fears, if you would share with us?
Sure. Oh, sure. The loss of my community. I mean, I was so just very attached to the community that I built up over the years, living in Chicago for 18 years. I have no family there. I still do not, but my community of friends and just the network there was foundational for me. And so I was very concerned that I was going to lose that. Now, and I also will tell you that with everything that we did to prepare ourselves for that move, in many ways, prepare yourself to experience, being thrown out of an airplane without a parachute, because there are those moments of like, whoa, what did I get myself into?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember moving from New York to Minnesota, and it was a big cultural change. One of the biggest challenges for me was exactly what you said, on a smaller scale, losing my community. This was a place where I had grown up with. I had cut my teeth in the corporate world, and I moved to Minnesota at a point in my life where I was kind of at an awkward phase. A lot of people my age were already married with kids, or they were older and not at all in the same place I was. And then I was just in the throes of getting married and doing things. So on a much smaller scale, I can appreciate some of those fears that you've described, but you experienced them on a much more elevated, more global level than I did.
Yes, Regina. And you know what that reminds me of? And this is in the book. So we were kind of in an interesting middle ground as well, because when we moved to Costa Rica, there were a lot of folks there that were of retirement age and, going on to their next chapter in life. And then there were a lot of younger people, the surfers and, just hanging out. And then there was this couple that just like showed up. And so for months, as we were, because you get to know everybody when you're in a little village, we would go up and down to the internet cafe and come back to the house. And for months, we had no idea that they had a nickname for us. And I walked in one day and I heard somebody say, "Oh, the witnesses are here." I'm like, "The witnesses? Who are the witnesses? What are you talking about?" And it was revealed to us that people thought that we were in a witness protection program.
Oh my goodness, that is hilarious.
Because they couldn't understand. They couldn't wrap their heads around, what are you doing here?
Oh, that is funny. What a fun story that is, right? So when you went through this radical change, I'm sure you learned a lot of life lessons. Could you share a couple of those life lessons with us?
Sure. There's a couple that come to mind. as I mentioned, we come from a consultant background, and when we left everything and we moved there, it became very clear to me that I was so attached to my title and my job and my career. And it took a peeling back the onion experience of getting to the core of, wow, you are so much more, Laura, than your title, than your work. And that was a lesson that I think many people can relate to, especially now, which with the way the world is moving, and so that definitely comes forward in terms of lessons learned. And the other thing is, I come from a family where my father would say, I can't means I won't, and you've set this expectation and you go and do it, and don't tell me that you can't do it. And then moving into a space that was new and different, I was struggling with quote lowering my expectations, and that felt very heavy, like, oh, I can't believe I'm lowering my expectations. And it was a shift in mindset of, it's not about lowering expectations, it's adjusting them, and adjusting to where you are in the moment, to where others are in the moment, to a different culture. It's so fascinating to move through that experience of sensing that weight of, oh, I'm lowering my expectations, to, yes, it's not, it's adjusting them. And I think that we can all benefit from that as well.
I think that's just very practical, Laura, when you say that about adjusting, because you map a game plan and you research and you look at risk and how you might mitigate risk. And then it's sort of, you have to let the chips fall where they may,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then it's like when you're driving in your car and you suddenly hit a roadblock, you have to readjust. So I think that's not just if you're making a huge radical change like you did, but
Yeah.
just in general in life. I think if you could bring more of that kind of mindset to what you're doing in the world, no matter what that is, whether it's in your career or your
Mm-hmm.
personal life, banish that can't, look at what you can do, and then adjust and modify along the way. So I think that's a very powerful life lesson that we can all
Yeah,
take away today.
definitely. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk a little bit about risk, because I remember when I made this 1,200-mile move. For some people, it seemed like it came out of left field. It really didn't. I had been thinking about it for a year. Um, and a lot of people literally said to me, wow, that's a big risk. And I really didn't view it that way. So I'm going to generalize right now, but in my work, I found that women tend to be more risk averse. Again, I'm generalizing, it's not every
Mm-hmm.
woman, when it comes to making a change than their male counterparts. So, what advice would you give to other women who might be harboring a deep desire to make a radical change or do something really different in their life? And I think this is important, especially right now, because so many people are reevaluating. So, what would that advice you would give to other women be?
Gosh. I what comes to mind is an apple tree. Okay. So there's an apple tree, and we are picking from this apple tree, and it's fulfilling us, as we're moving through, picking through this apple tree. And then there comes a time where it's, wow, maybe I need more than this apple tree. Maybe I need to go out into the orchards and see where the other types of trees are, and what apples are growing on those trees. Are they, green apples, red apples? What are those different apples? And for women who are looking to maybe make that move into the orchards, it's looking at the current apple tree and asking yourself, is this going to sustain me for the future?
That's great.
And if you can say with confidence, this is sustaining me for the future, then why move to all the other apple trees? If you feel that this is unsustainable for the future, and future is a key component, like looking forward versus present, then start moving yourself slowly through slight edge, type of activities to the other orchards.
Yeah, that's a very powerful image because I think most women can relate to that. And I would say that at some point, you might even get to those different varieties of apples and say, oh, look, a pear tree, or something else. Like once you've broadened that horizon or stepped out of your comfort zone, it doesn't just open you up to like or similar things. It really opens up a whole worldview or a whole wide variety of things for consideration. So I really like that apple tree, apple orchard analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it also speaks to there is no right answer, because for some people, focusing on the one apple tree that is in front of them is going to serve them in the future, because foundationally it's there for them, whatever the foundational pieces are, maybe their core values that are driving their foundation. Like what is that? And that's perfectly fine. So it's just a matter of assessing it.
Mm-hmm. So you've coached a lot of folks. I noticed that you have used an EQ model with them, and I think that's something that's incredibly important, especially in this day and age, especially around emotional resilience and things like that. So with your own experience, did you use EQ, or did EQ influence your sabbatical? And how has that impacted your own career path today?
Yes. So when we first moved there, we had bats in the roof, and it was clockwork. Like, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of bats. At sunset, boom, they would all start flying out. I was lying in bed at night, and bats, because there was a hole in our roof coming down, they would fly, and I would feel them across my face, right? So we were like, we have to get rid of these bats. What are we going to do? Like, call an exterminator? Like, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to task this out? Well, the suggestion was, oh, no big deal. Put a boa constrictor in your roof.
What?
What? What do you mean put a boa constrictor in your roof? And I share that because how does EQ come into play there? In so many ways. It's having that flexibility, having that openness of, okay, so this is a different perspective. This is interesting. Something that you're uncomfortable doing, and your impulse is to be like, what are you talking about? So managing that impulse and creating the space of possibility. And so, and I have so many examples of where interpersonal relationships, even in that conversation, embracing it and not thinking, what are you thinking? Because when we say, what are you thinking? What kind of crazy idea is that? It can come across as attacking the character of a person, not necessarily the idea. And so you need to, look at your emotional expression and how you are, like your tone of voice and how you're moving into that conversation. There's so many examples of EQ, but that's the one that comes top of mind.
Well, that really is one I would say does take the cake for sure. A whole new image of pest control in my mind. I will tell you that for sure.
It worked.
Yay, that's awesome.
We ended up not doing it because we had cats, but it worked for other people in other homes. But I was like, I don't want to expose our kitties to that.
Yeah, you didn't want to risk that the what was it? The boa constrictor would maybe have a little bit too much access to, here at my house, we have a lot of deer. So I'm always like, when we have our garden comes in, I'm like, oh, it's the salad buffet for the deer. Look at that. My neighbors get all up in arms and I'm like, they got to eat too. So I don't really get too bunched up, but So, talking with clients and business colleagues, I'll have to say that I think this focus on mental health and well-being has become incredibly important in the last couple of
Yeah.
years. And, in the conversations I'm having, a lot of workers are just not as resilient as they once were. And quite honestly, some people, not all, again, I'm generalizing, don't really seem to be flourishing the way they once
Yeah.
did. And I think that's where EQ can really come in. So, how can companies use EQ to help promote well-being in the workplace?
Um, it what I'm seeing right now, just in our work with clients, is it's fostering the interpersonal connection. That is the first and foremost component that seems to be at play, because we are in such a environment, from working from home and just being so distracted by the great shiny next shiny thing that's there and our cell phones. So being taking intentional action to foster those interpersonal relationships. We just had a call with an executive team this morning, and the CEO was going to cancel the meeting because they had changes in the team and a couple leaders were leaving and they were waiting for new leaders to come on. And just in my conversation, I was like, I really think we need to maintain this connection, the momentum that we've started building foundationally for the executive team. And our conversation this morning was just mind-blowing. And what came forward because of that interpersonal relationship that we created in that space was empathy, authenticity, transparency, like having really critical conversations of the pressures that each leader is feeling in regards to what the board is requesting of them, and how they can move together and support one another through that process. Because we often feel that we're walking the plank alone, right? And it all came forward through that interpersonal connection. So I cannot reiterate it more and more and more. The time spent on that is going to create exponential growth for you moving forward as a team, and how you're navigating the strategic plans that you're putting together, the budgets, I mean, all of that. And what you're bringing to the board and delivering it to the board as a team, not feeling as if you're one person delivering it.
Well, it's so interesting because we started out the call talking about the inspiration for the book, and we talked about one of your fears, and it was community. And so here we are. When you think about community, right, it's that interpersonal connection. And now we're talking about it in the workplace. So there's a lot of synergy with the kinds of fears and the things that are really critical in helping to maintain a healthy mindset and to be resilient in the workplace. So I think it's sort of coming full circle from what we talked about right at the beginning.
That's an awesome connection that you just made. Thank you for pulling it back like that.
Yeah. So, you've worked with lots of clients. We're just talking about an example of one of the clients that you're working with. And I think sometimes we create the event or write the book or something that we're seeking or that our clients are seeking. So when it comes to making a radical or a not so radical career change, right? Because we have a lot of corporate women on the call today or watching us today. What are some fears that people harbor? Now, you mentioned community earlier on, but what are some of the other fears that people might harbor when they look to do something radically different when it comes to their career?
Yeah. Fear of failure. That's so prevalent. And it's very important to increase your awareness around the narrative that you're creating around the experience for you. Sure, you can create a narrative of, I left this and I went to another job and it didn't work out and I'm a failure. Or you can create a different narrative of, I had the courage and I took this chance to, try another apple orchard, go to a different apple orchard. And it was a scratchy sweater and it didn't really work. And now I know what I know, and I've learned what I've learned, and I'm going to move to the next one. It's reframing that fear of failure. Because when you read the book, you could, oh, wow, you're really failing at that, Laura. There's a lot of failures in there.
Well, I totally agree. Fear of failure is a big concern, but I like to think in what you just described at like trying that other orchard or other trees in the orchard is that you're failing forward, right? So you learned a lot about yourself, you learned what you didn't like. So I think sometimes it's easier to weed out what we don't like than it is to find what we do like. And that's your analogy of peeling back the onion. By finding what you don't like, you will reveal what it is that you do want. So I think it's an important part of moving yourself forward in your career. So I want to follow up because we just talked about biggest fear. What's the biggest mistake people make when making a radical or career change or something?
Career change. Okay, so career is the word that I'm going to hang on here.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So when I think a big mistake, it may not be the biggest mistake, but a big mistake is thinking a change in environment is all you need. So, yes, a change in environment can help shift your perspective and maybe even some undesirable behaviors. But fundamentally, when you may be running, like what you may be running from could stay with you. So let me give you an example. If, if you have avoidance behaviors that are coming forward because you don't like your boss, and so you're not choosing to have a candid conversation or help move that forward, and your idea is, well, I'm just going to go somewhere else. There are bad bosses everywhere. So that is a behavior that you are going to bring with you to wherever you're going. Another one is, oh, I'm seeking work-life balance. I hear this a lot. Oh, I'm seeking work-life balance. I need to, I need to cut my hours, and you have trouble creating boundaries. So then you move to a new career and you find yourself experiencing scope creep in terms of your work-life balance because you yourself had difficulty setting a precedent, walking into that new career, that new role, so that other leaders can understand, oh, so-and-so is available between this time and this time. So-and-so sets aside this time in their calendar for strategic thinking. So, so if you're not creating those boundaries when you're moving from one place to another, those behaviors are going to follow you. And so those are the mistakes that often come forward when I'm speaking with people.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there about sometimes you need to resolve some of those things first and see if it's truly the current organization that's the issue, or if you're able to do some of what you just talked about. So for example, those boundaries, we train people how to work with us. So if we didn't train the people here how to work with us, going somewhere else, we'll have some of those same problems or challenges or issues follow us. So I think that's a very timely and valid mistake to take a look at if you are looking to make some kind of change. So Laura, it's hard to believe, but we are winding down on time. But before we go, what's one piece of advice that you can offer to our listeners or viewers today?
One piece, oh, we have to make it short and sweet.
Yes.
I would say to take that, that leap, whatever that leap is for them, whether it's a career change, whether it's a radical sabbatical, because I feel that however you move through it, you're going to experience what I call the ABCs. So you're going to have an adventure. You're going to break biases. Like you're going to break down biases through that experience, and you're going to create connection. So think about what that could look like for you in terms of having an adventure, breaking biases and creating connection.
Fabulous. So don't forget your ABCs.
Yes,
I
yes.
love that. We're back to the
Yeah.
beginning. Don't forget your ABCs.
Don't forget your ABCs. And I wrote an article for Psychology Today in the Radical Sabbatical blog that I have specifically on that. So
perfect. So that concludes our interview with Laura Berger. And just a reminder, you can learn more about Laura at www.berdeogroup.com, and I will spell that. It's BERDEO group.com. So thank you so much for being here today, Laura. We so appreciate the time you've spent with us. And please don't forget to check out reginabarr.com, where you can learn more about upcoming podcasts and other events under the events page. So with that, thank you all for joining us today, and have a wonderful day.